important issue that we're discussing, and I'd like to support Senator Daly on this bill. I don't think we can underestimate the seriousness of this issue and the statistics that surround this with regard to health and safety on farms and farm businesses. And the point that Senator Daly raises is that you can't actually treat a farm like another business, because very often the farm and the home, the business and the home, are inextricably linked, and they're one and the same. And it's a unique set of circumstances. And I know the experience that I had in my former life as President of the Farming Union, where when we looked at health and safety and we looked at construction and other areas of business, it's actually probably much easier to regulate and control and get a set of directives that manage those risks and manage the issues on those businesses. But a farm, by very nature of its extensive nature, it's very often disparate, it's spread out, and it's not like a building site or a construction facility. So I think it's important to acknowledge that. I'd just like to share with the House, in my experience, when we set up the Farm Safety Partnership in Northern Ireland, we were actually losing one farmer a month as a fatality on farms, a completely unacceptable statistic that we had to do something to try and address this. The partnership approach was essential for the success of this, and partnership at the moment in Northern Ireland is made up of Health and Safety Executive, the Department of Agriculture, the Ulster Farmers Union, the Northern Ireland Agricultural Producers Association and the Young Farmers Clubs of Ulster. And it's important that this partnership approach, this coordination, is key. What we also found a long number of years ago, that the main thing with farm safety was about awareness of the issues. And once you raise or elevate the awareness of the issues, very often you mitigate some of the risks immediately. It's also about driving behavioural change. And it's an interesting phenomenon that you learn very quickly when you have this discussion with farmers. Farmers are a unique bunch of individuals because actually they don't fear death, which is a frightening thing for anybody to consider. But what they do fear is leaving their family, their wives, their spouses, their children with the mess and the horror when they're removed out of the conundrum. So it's the fear of the consequences of taking them out of the farm business. And it's interesting because when you look at behavioural change, the thing that we found very early on was that the key drivers in this were children, there were grandchildren, there were wives and partners. Those were the people that by their interaction with very often the alpha male in the business, drove behavioural change and changed their actions. It was important also to acknowledge that when we were looking at this, it was about keeping this message simple. And in the north, they looked at the acronym for SAFE, S-A-F-E. It was about slurry, it was about animals, it was about falls, and it was about equipment, the four main areas that were losing farmers on a monthly basis. It was also important that we identified very early, as Senator Daly said, the two key vulnerable groups here, the young on farm and the old people on farm. And very often it was a case where farmers who had a lifetime experience working on farms actually had reached a point in life where they weren't as mobile, weren't as agile as they were, and just couldn't react to a situation quick enough to avoid an accident. However, it's important, I think, to stress a note of caution. Farm Safety Partnership worked in Northern Ireland because there were only a small number of partners in that. When they tried to replicate the model in GB, a meeting we had initially in Northern Ireland with 4 or 5 partners, the same meeting replicated in GB had 62 stakeholders. That was so unwieldy and so unmanageable that it was very difficult to deliver. I'd just like to conclude by saying I think this is a hugely important issue, and support Senator Daly. I think that anything we can do to prevent any loss of life on farms has to be supported and encouraged. And I think the key thing is about partnership, it's about coordination, and rather than a siloed mentality, everyone working together.
Thank you, Senator.